Hey, Larken Rose here, and there's a number of topics that I sort of expect voluntarists to all understand, but then they demonstrate that they don't. And this is going to be one of those. This is about the concept of common ground and having allies who are like-minded and yada, yada, yada. And there seems to be this notion that if you don't like somebody or you don't get along with them or you don't have the same interests or preference or lifestyle or hobbies or whatever, then you're not really allies. And I don't know why this needs to be explained. It's kind of annoying. The only thing we need to have in common, the only common ground we need to have for peaceful coexistence is that we agree not to initiate force or fraud against each other. And that's all. Now, that's a huge thing because that rules out literally everybody who's a statist, because every single statist, left, right, middle, minarchist, constitutionalist, communist, fascist, anything else, every single one of them wants people to come to me to demand money for me, to force me to pay for one thing or another. Now, the minarchists might say, well, we only want you forced to pay for this tiny little list of things. It's like, okay, but you still want me forced to pay for things, which means peaceful coexistence is out the window. On the other hand, there can be tons of people with very different viewpoints and attitudes and mentalities that I can totally get along with, but not even get along with. Like, it doesn't even require us being buddies or being friendly. We might have literally nothing to do with each other. Like, I find you annoying, but you don't attack me and I don't attack you, so you go be annoying over there and I'll be over here doing my own thing, and we can peacefully coexist. And it's such a basic element of humanity that's kind of sad this needs to be explained even to some anarchists. If you look at almost any major city in the U.S., there will be a Chinatown and a place where there's a bunch of Italians, a place where there's a bunch of Russians, and a place where not every culture is in everything, but they group together because they have more in common, they have a language in common, they have a culture in common, and that's fine. They don't need to be having shootouts with each other. They just naturally segregate into, and I don't mean like coercively, it's just, well, these people hang out with the people who are kind of like them, and these people hang out with the people who are kind of like them. And then lots of people don't give a crap about any of that, and they mingle and they hang out with whoever. And all of that is peaceful coexistence. Like, you don't have to make everybody else agree with you about anything. And that's a thing that we're seeing from the political left right now. Well, kind of forever, but in particular right now, where they're not at all content with having somebody leave them alone but have a different opinion. No, we're going to come after you and attack you and condemn you and have a tantrum at you and tell you how evil you are if you don't have the same opinion as us, even if you believe in peaceful coexistence and you don't attack us and you don't do anything to us. No, you have to believe it. You have to have right think, or we're sending the thought police after you. And that's happening all over the place. And, the political left is obviously not the only ones who do this or have done this in the past. But it's a little bit weird to see voluntarists who seem to think that picking the friends and the people they have the most in common with, that has something to do with determining whether there can be peaceful coexistence. There can be peaceful coexistence with huge numbers of people you have nothing in common with. And the only common ground is you don't attack each other. And so I see a bunch of atheists going, you can't be a Christian and be an anarchist. Well, I know a bunch of Christian anarchists. And you can debate whether the scriptures match this. And, well, I don't care. They're anarchists. They advocate that nobody come rob me, which means we get along. Now, in that case, we actually do get along, and, I am perfectly fine to hang out with them and have a chat, even though I don't share their beliefs, because we have the one common ground that matters. There's also a bunch in the sort of hippie crowd, for lack of a better term, that I get along with. And then there's a bunch of people I don't really get along with who are voluntarists who I find obnoxious and loud and stupid and a whole bunch of negative characteristics. but we peacefully coexist because they don't advocate violence against me and I don't advocate it against them. And it's weird that a lot of voluntarists seem to miss the point that being separate and not at war is good enough. Like, just achieving peaceful coexistence, even if we have nothing to do with each other, whether it's as individuals or groups or religions or whatever, that's perfectly fine. And so it's funny because people will complain at me that I can't just like be buddies with all the different flavors of statism that are against certain kinds of authoritarian garbage. And I did a talk about this at Porkfest. Like, can't you be buddies with the conservatives and the Libertarian Party and the constitutionalists and the liberals when they're against the war? Are any liberals against the war anymore? It's like 3 left. Because we don't have common ground on the one thing that matters. They want me forcibly robbed and controlled. And the fact that we have a common enemy in some other area, we both are opposed to that particular kind of thuggery and extortion, doesn't change the fact that they're in favor of a different kind of thuggery and extortion against me. We, by definition, can't get along because they want me forced to go along with their stupid authoritarian agenda. And so a bunch of people complain that I'm not trying to be all-inclusive with a bunch of people who want me extorted and violently dominated by a ruling class. Yeah, we can't get along. Like, because of them, by definition, we can't get along because they advocate government using violence against me. That's not getting along. And on the other hand, I know a bunch of voluntarists who complain that I'm too inclusive when I talk about the people I can peacefully coexist with, including people with habits or lifestyles or spiritual or religious beliefs or whatever that I find weird or whatever else. And I don't have to like them. We don't have to be buddies. We don't have to have anything in common except we don't initiate violence. And it's so weird for voluntarists to be pointing at some people who are still statists and go, well, they're on my side. And pointing at people who are voluntarists but have some, weird lifestyle and go, well, they're not on my side. Well, what side? What side of what? We're not making an army of we're all the same over here. Like, that's like Marxist bullshit. The idea that everybody's going to think the same way and arrange things the same way. That's not the goal. That shouldn't be the goal. The goal is just we don't violently attack each other. And so there can be the college age partying crowd who stays up way too late listening to crappy music. Okay, do that. Do it far enough away that I can't hear it, or I'll go far enough away that I can't hear it. And then we can get along fine even if we never meet and have nothing in common and have nothing to do with each other. Thus the power of freedom of disassociation. But the freedom of disassociation is perfectly compatible with peaceful coexistence. Like, I can think you're an annoying, obnoxious, stupid person that I want to have nothing to do with, and we can peacefully coexist because neither of us attacks the other one. It's not that hard. And this can be for, 100 different reasons that we don't get along, we don't see eye to eye on something or other, even something important, but we do on the most important thing, which is don't initiate violence. So I think there's just a tendency of people to sort of form crowds and groups and then there's the group of people I actually like and get along with and talk to and that stuff. But that's not the limit of who I can peacefully coexist with. The limit of that is anybody who doesn't initiate violence against me, because I won't initiate violence against them. That's it. Like, that's pretty dang expensive. You talk about diverse, you can do anything under the sun except attack me. Or attack anybody else. It's not just me. And we can peacefully coexist. Like, why is that so difficult to comprehend? And apparently that's even difficult for some voluntarists to comprehend because they form these little cliques and this one whines about that one and I like this guy's theory about this particular weird thing and well, I like his weird theory about this weird thing. Okay, that's fine. And you can disagree and you can argue, but to decide that you're my enemy, no, you're just somebody I want, like, there's a big difference between I want to have nothing to do with you and I'm going to violently attack you. This is a distinction that every anarchist should already understand. There's allowed to be tons of people you want to have nothing to do with as long as you're not attacking them and they're not attacking you. And all those people that have something in common who still want to attack you, peaceful coexistence is impossible until you convince them, or something convinces them, to become voluntarists. They can be your best buddies. They can be great people. They can be noble people. And I've talked about this a bunch of times, that if the state collapsed, there's a whole bunch of statists I'd rather be around, as opposed to a whole bunch of anarchists I know that I wouldn't want to be around. Because in that setting, even the statists, they're not going to have a state to vote for and control me anyway. And in their day-to-day lives, we'll get along great because they're decent people. But they still have this political belief that right now is making them vote for a monster to rob and control me, which is kind of obnoxious and by definition means we can't get along. So the whole common ground thing, it's some people have it all the way backwards. They try to expand the, like, we let the big tent party thing that political parties do. We want to allow everybody in. Like, well, what does that mean? Like, to be your buddies or to peacefully coexist? Because if it's to peacefully coexist, you can't let anybody in who advocates government because they don't let themselves in. They are the ones who refuse to peacefully coexist because they keep believing in government and they keep advocating violence against their neighbors by way of that government. Like, why would we have a big tent for them? And as for people who can peacefully coexist, I want such a big tent that some of the people in the tent can be way over there and I never want to talk to them and never want to have anything to do with them. And that's perfectly compatible with peaceful coexistence. Freedom of disassociation is very, very important in a free society. And there's a bunch of people who I find annoying and obnoxious that I will have nothing to do with, and yet neither of us attacks each other. And that's the common ground that matters. Like, not for picking your best buds and stuff and who you're going to hang out with, but as far as the future of humanity, it's weird to watch voluntarists think they should have alliances with people who want to violently dominate them while spending their time criticizing people for one stupid reason or another who don't want them violently dominated. It's like, okay, you can criticize them and say they're dumb, but at least they're not attacking you. So people's standard of what common ground they think we need to have, it's just weird. You don't need to like me. You can complain about all sorts of things. You can complain about what I think about religion or what I don't think about religion, what I think about evolution, what I think about cultural stuff and relationship stuff and 8 million, zillion, billion different things. You're allowed to not like what I have to say on all those. You're allowed to have nothing to do with me. You're allowed to never talk to me, have nothing to do with me. That's perfectly fine. If you don't attack me and I don't attack you, we can get along. I don't know if you call that getting along exactly, but we can peacefully coexist. But so much inside the movement is people whining at other voluntarists, like, the way you described that, I don't think that's quite right. It's like, you believe in the non-aggression principle and you think that's an oversimplification of who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? I mean, you can have that philosophical discussion, but to have these divisions as if that's what matters is how you describe and how you try to conceptualize, like, self-ownership and not attacking other people. Like, okay, yeah, by all means, have the discussion, but, like, to have divides and you're the enemy, but you're not really an anarchist because you describe it that way. Well, does he attack you? Does he advocate a ruling class? No. Well, then shut up. Like, why does it matter? Go focus on all the zillions of people, including well-intentioned people, who still believe in advocating violent aggression against their neighbors. So, it's sort of funny, and you know, you go about your day-to-day life and you meet a zillion people, and you can say hi and you can be friendly, and they're probably statists because the vast majority of people still are, and you realize I could totally get along with these people, but there's this part of their belief system, almost certainly, that includes believing in a government and advocating that I be robbed to fund whatever they want. It's true of the left and the right and everything in between. And yet those people, like, otherwise we could get along fine. They're good people. They know how to be civilized and decent and generous and polite and caring and all that stuff. They've just been taught some BS. So focus on the BS, because the authoritarian BS, that is the thing that has to change. And as for personality types and lifestyles, who gives a crap? Like, people can have a vastly different worldview on how people should behave, and maybe I'll just be way over here while they're way over there, and we'll leave each other alone. And that's all that's needed for peaceful coexistence. So, anyway, I guess that's enough of that rant. Yeehaw.